I don't remember the last time my father looked at me and actually saw me. Not the version he built in his head. Not the inconvenience he tried to hide behind polite silences. Just me. Last Christmas. I stood outside his window and watched them laugh around the table I used to set every year. He didn't even glance toward the door. There was a new family now, a new daughter in my chair, for a long time. I told myself it didn't matter. That love was something you earned if you worked hard enough, if you kept forgiving, if you made yourself small enough to fit inside other people's comfort. But standing there in the cold, hearing them toast to family, I finally understood. You can't stay where you're no longer seen. So I walked away, and this time, I didn't just leave the house. I left their story. They don't know it yet, but the next time they say my name, it won't be out of pity. It'll be because the silence they taught me is over. I drove through 2 hours of winter silence before my father's house came into view. The windows glowed, warm and golden, as if the cold outside didn't exist. I stopped across the street and watched through the glass. He was pouring wine, laughing. Evelyn arranged the dishes like she belonged there. Brian leaned toward the fire, telling a story, everyone listening. And beside my mother's photo, a chair sat empty, set neatly, as though someone had just stepped away. That chair used to be mine. There was no call, no message, no place left for me. Just that empty seat, mocking what used to be home. My reflection blurred against their laughter, a ghost outside its own life. Then my father lifted his glass. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw his smile. I didn't need to stay. My mother once said that when they take away your chair, you build your own table. That night, I started to. 3 weeks later, I bought an abandoned ranch outside Sedona, dry land, forgotten fences, red dust for miles. I called it Fairchild Acres, after her. For months, I worked alone, planting mint and lavender, carving a wooden sign. Fairchild Acres, established 1979. A year later, success felt possible, until a letter arrived. Notice: Fairchild Acres is being transferred by request of a legal co-heir. At the bottom, a signature chilled me. Zelda F. Lowell. My mother's name, my father's handwriting. The next morning, I drove to Prescott National Bank, the letter still folded tight in my coat pocket. The air inside smelled of paper and recycled air, and the young branch manager avoided my eyes when I said I was the owner of Fairchild Acres. He shuffled through a folder, then cleared his throat. The file lists a co-owner, ma'am, a Mrs. Zelda F. Lowell. The room tilted for a second. My mother's name, rewritten to fit my father's, I managed to say, quiet but sharp. That woman's been dead for 2 years. Silence. He blinked, muttered an apology, and closed the file as if it could erase what I'd seen. I walked out before my voice could crack. On the way home, I stopped at Juniper and Sage, a little coffee shop my mother used to love. The same chipped mugs, the same smell of roasted beans and lavender. I was reaching for my wallet when a soft voice behind me said my name. I turned. Evelyn stood there in a cream sweater, pale and nervous. We sat at a corner table. For a long time she said nothing. Then finally, Raymond's making a mistake. Brian's in debt, deep. He thinks selling the ranch will save him. My throat tightened. Selling my land. She reached into her bag and slid a thin folder across the table. I copied these from his desk. He used an old notary stamp, changed the year, even replaced your mother's last name. Be careful, Zandra. He doesn't think like a father anymore. The handwriting was clumsy, trembling. My stomach turned. Thank you, I whispered. Evelyn's eyes glossed with tears. I did it for your mother. She deserved better than this. That night, back at Fairchild Acres, I stood at the gate beneath the porch light. The wind carried the scent of mint from the fields. The wooden sign, Fairchild Acres, established 1979, glowed faintly under the desert moon. They'd faked her name to steal what she left me. I rested my hand on the gate and said into the quiet, if they've touched this land, they've touched her honor. 2 days later, I drove to Lowell & Sons Agricultural Real Estate, The office that once smelled of coffee and polished wood, now thick with dust and paper. My father sat behind his old desk. Brian slouched on the couch, surrounded by stacks of unpaid invoices. My father's voice was dry as desert sand. "Why are you here? That ranch belongs to the Lowells. Your mother was only keeping it under her name." I placed the photocopied documents on his desk. "These prove otherwise. And I know about the forged papers you're hiding." Brian's voice cracked. "You don't understand. You left. Dad's been trying to keep the company afloat. He did what he had to." I stared at him. "He forged a dead woman's name. Brian. That's not saving anything." My father's palm slammed against the table. "Don't speak to me that way." "No," I said. "You taught me precision. You taught me numbers don't lie. I learned truth from you. And it's the only thing I still owe you." I turned to leave. But something on the desk caught my eye. A folder marked Fairchild Management, LLC. My name printed neatly below it. The air went thin. He was using my identity as a front, running illegal property deals under a shell company tied to me. If the IRS ever came knocking, I'd be the one in handcuffs. I walked out without a word. Outside, the wind howled across the empty parking lot, red dust swirling like smoke. In the rearview mirror, the office shrank until it disappeared. He'd turned truth into paper. Fine. I'd turn his paper into evidence. I'd spent years exposing other people's lies. Now I was auditing my own blood. The records didn't lie. Transfers from Lowell and Sons to Fairchild Management, LLC, the name my father had stolen from me, appeared month after month, labeled as maintenance expenses. But the money didn't go to upkeep. It went to a property deal in Yuma. My name, my tax ID, tied to every dollar. Fairchild Management wasn't even real, just a shell company with my name on it. He'd turned my integrity into camouflage for his crimes. By sundown, my kitchen table was buried under printouts, paper ghosts, every page whispering how deep his greed ran. I called Sheriff Glenn Holbrook, my old colleague from the IRS task force. His tone was even cautious. "If you're right," he said, "this isn't tax evasion, it's money laundering. Be careful, Zandra. He won't let you make this public." I changed every password, checked every camera, then added one more, hidden, facing the gate. 2 days later, before sunrise, my phone buzzed. Motion alert. A white truck sat at the entrance. Lowell and Sons printed across the side. Brian in a gray jacket, holding bolt cutters. Behind him. My father stood still, arms crossed. I hit record. The chain snapped. Dust rose like smoke. My father pointed toward the house, shouting something I didn't need to hear to understand. He'd come to take what wasn't his. I called Glenn. "He's here. My brother's cutting my gate. Stay inside. I'm on my way." Minutes later, red and blue lights spilled across the dirt road. Glenn stepped out, firm and calm. "Mr. Lowell, you're trespassing. Do you have legal authorization?" My father waved papers. "This land's mine. I've got proof." Glenn flipped through, his jaw tightening. "This seal's from a Phoenix notary office shut down 2 years ago." That was all it took. Glenn kept the file as evidence. My father backed off, furious, the truck vanishing down the road. He turned to me, eyes steady. "Find your mother's lawyer, someone who knew her. There might be something she left that he doesn't know about." Only one name surfaced, Marla Jensen. That night, I found her number. Her voice was older, rough but kind. "Your mother, Zelda Fairchild, yes. I remember. She left 2 wills, one official, one handwritten. Are you sure you want to open that door?" I hung up and stared at the papers covering my table. My mother had seen this coming long before I did. She'd left her truth buried in ink, and it was time to bring it to light. 3 days later, Glenn came back to the ranch. He handed me a folder, his expression grim. That notary office was part of a real estate laundering network. Your father isn't just forging signatures, he's deep in criminal territory. I stood on the porch, the wind carrying the scent of mint from the fields. Before I could respond, my phone rang. His voice was sharp, familiar. "What did you tell the sheriff?" You trying to send your father to prison? No. I'm trying to stop you. You don't understand, he said, breath heavy. Brian's in trouble, real trouble, debts, people after him. Selling the land is the only way. There was a pause long enough to hear my own heartbeat. You're saving him by destroying me. Silence. Then the line went dead. I drove to Watson Lake, to a cabin where Marla Jensen lived. She welcomed me with a box of old files, dust softening their edges. Your mother trusted me with this, she said, handing over a yellowed envelope. The handwriting was hers. If anyone in my family tries to sell Fairchild land for greed, ownership will go to the one who keeps it honest. My throat closed. She'd known. Marla smiled sadly. If this holds up, you'll win. Not just in court, but in principle. I looked out over the copper-red horizon. The sun bled into the sand, and I whispered to no one but her memory. I'll protect it. Mom. For both of us. The alarm pierced through the dark just before sunrise. The camera feed glowed on my phone. Harsh and grainy, headlights cutting through dust. 5 shadows stepping out of a white pickup. My father. Brian. Evelyn. A man in a suit holding a clipboard. And another, kneeling at my gate with a tool bag. A locksmith. I called Glenn. My voice came out steadier than I felt. They're here. They've got a realtor and a locksmith. Stay inside, he said. I'm coming. I hit record. The desert wind pushed through the window screens, carrying the dry scent of mint from the field. Outside, my father pointed toward the house, shouting over the noise of the wind. She doesn't live here. She's holding it for me. Open the gate. Evelyn tried to stop him, but he shoved her arm away. Brian stared at the dirt, jaw tight. The locksmith hesitated. Sir, are you sure you have authority for this? My father held up a folder of papers. Legal authorization. Do it. The lock snapped. The gate creaked open. My pulse roared in my ears. 10 minutes later, Glenn's cruiser tore through the dust, lights flashing. He stepped out slow, boots grinding gravel. Morning, everyone. What's happening here? My father's tone was icy calm. We're reclaiming family property. She's squatting on land that isn't hers. Glenn flipped open a file from the county clerk's office. According to these records, ownership belongs solely to Zandra Lowell, Zelda Fairchild. Anyone entering without her consent is trespassing. My father's voice cracked. This is a misunderstanding. We have rights. Then prove them in court, Glenn said. But not on her land, not today. The locksmith backed away, tools shaking in his hands. The realtor muttered an apology and returned to the truck. Brian looked at me, eyes wet with anger. You're really doing this? To your own family? No, I said quietly. I'm protecting what's mine. My father glared at me through the rising dust. You're turning your father into a criminal. No, I said. You did that yourself. Glenn's voice cut the air like a blade. I suggest you all leave before I stop asking nicely. They left in silence. When the last car disappeared, I stood at the gate, hair whipped across my face, the fear inside me burning into something sharper, strength. That night, Evelyn called. Her voice trembled. They won't stop. Zandra. Raymond already sold part of the land to Silver Sky Resorts, a pre-ownership deal. They'll send people next week. I sent Glenn the footage, every second of it. He texted back only one line. Next time. We act. By noon 4 days later, the sky turned copper gray. The wind howled low across the valley. Storm coming. 3 trucks rolled down the dirt road. My father's, Brian's, and 2 others loaded with men and equipment. One of them pulled a flatbed carrying a small excavator. I stepped onto the porch, hit record again. The horizon blurred in red dust. My father shouted through the rising wind, Zandra, that land is mine! Your mother only held it! I yelled back, voice ripped raw by the storm. If it's yours, why forge her name? She left this place to whoever keeps it honest, and you've never known what honesty is. Brian ran forward, waving crumpled papers. We've got temporary authority, look, not when my mother's will still stands, I said. lifting the original document. The wind screamed, drowning his words. Then, through the chaos, the sheriff's siren cut clean. Glenn's vehicle came barreling through the dust, lights flashing gold against the storm. He stepped out, coat whipping around him, holding a document high. "Raymond Lowell, you're under temporary detention for forged notary documents, real estate fraud, and trespassing." My father froze. "She set me up." "No," Glenn said evenly. "You did that the moment you signed her name." He turned my father around, cuffing his wrists as the storm howled harder. Brian collapsed to his knees. "I made him do it." He sobbed. "I owed money. People threatened me. He was just trying to save me." Evelyn ran to Brian, wrapping her arms around him. I stood still, dust coating my face, hair, and clothes, watching the man who raised me disappear into the storm. Minutes later, the wind began to die. The air cleared, sunlight breaking through the haze. Glenn looked over at me, eyes kind. "Justice is never peaceful," he said, "but when it comes, it leaves quiet behind." I turned toward the wooden sign by the gate. Fairchild Acres. The letters were buried in red sand, but still visible. I brushed the dust away with my hand. Nothing about that moment felt like victory. It felt like truth, and truth never came clean. 3 weeks after the storm, I sat in the Prescott County Courthouse, the air heavy with dust and silence. Across from me, my father looked smaller than I remembered, his gray suit stiff, his eyes avoiding mine. Evelyn sat behind him, pale and shaking. Glenn waited beside me, calm as ever, and Marla Jensen opened her worn leather folder. The judge's gavel echoed, Lowell versus Fairchild. Dispute of ownership and forgery. Marla spoke first, steady and precise. Evidence proves Mr. Raymond Lowell used a forged authorization from the late Zelda Fairchild to sell land he didn't own. The opposing lawyer argued my father only meant to protect the family. "Family doesn't need lies to survive," I said. Glenn played the video. The broken gate. My father shouting. The sheriff's warning. The sound filled the room like thunder. Then, Marla placed a yellowed page before the judge. My mother's handwriting glimmered under the light. "If anyone in my family tries to sell Fairchild land for greed, ownership goes to the one who keeps it honest." The judge nodded. "Ownership belongs to Zandra Lowell Zelda Fairchild. I won." But it didn't feel like victory. Justice had its cost. Today. It took my father. The night after the trial, silence filled the ranch like water in an empty well. Outside, the wind carried the scent of mint through the open window, and the old fence groaned softly in the dark. I brewed tea and opened a leather notebook I hadn't touched in months. The pages that once held numbers and plans were blank now, except for 2 words written at the top. Forgive. Maybe. I took a sheet of paper and began to write. "You once told me money could keep everything together, but money couldn't hold honor. It couldn't hold me. You cut me out of Christmas, out of family, out of your memory. Yet the law you despised is what placed me back where I belonged. I don't need your apology. I only need you to know that I kept her name, Fairchild, because I still believe in her, and in truth." I folded the letter, set it beside my mother's worn leather gloves, the initials Z, F, still carved into the wrist. I wouldn't send it. He didn't need to hear it. It wasn't for him, it was for me. Proof that I'd survived the storm without becoming part of it. Through the window, moonlight washed over the sign reading Fairchild Acres. For the first time, peace didn't feel like victory, it felt like freedom. A year later, Sedona's sky stretched wide and clean, sunlight spilling across red earth like copper dust. I set a long table outside beneath the porch, red cloth, roasted ham, and a mint pie cooling in the breeze. Glenn arrived first, carrying a bottle of apple cider, his smile easy. Then came Evelyn, softer now, holding a basket of bread she'd baked herself. Last was Brian, thinner but steady after 7 months of rehab. He stopped at the gate, staring at the old wooden sign. "It's faded," he said quietly. "Let me fix it." We knelt side by side, brushing sand from the wood, painting the letters Fairchild Acres in bright gold. The sunset caught the wet paint, and for a moment the sign glowed as if the land itself was breathing again. That Christmas dinner was small, no grand toasts, no noise, just the gentle sound of forks and quiet laughter. One chair at the table remained empty, left for my mother. Not because she was gone, but because she was in everything I'd kept standing. Glenn lifted his glass. To the boundaries that keep love honest, I smiled. He once cut me out of Christmas. This year, I built my own table. And for the first time, it felt like home.